आर्ट्स वाले लोगों को लेमोन सेटअप लावाय फिर बाप
झालं ते चालू काय हे चालू 40 मिनिटाचं स्क्रीन शेअर टाकावं लागते आता लगेच तरच हे मोठं होते मग बरोबर ना मग तू स्क्रीन शेअर सगळंच नाही ना तर स्क्रीन शेअर काय करायचं आता बोलताना लगेच काढून बघू बोलताना प्लॅन पाहिजे किती वेळ ठेवायचं काय करायचं काय सगळं आमची चालेल सर आम्हाला त्या ताकदीला थांबवायचं सेटिंग चालू होईल कुठे येतो
लोड घेऊ बंद करायचं काय आपण इलेक्ट्रिक जरी असतात तरी मिशन बंद करतो काय करणार
Good morning, all. Welcome to all the participants in
सर कधी काढायचं गोष्टी कधी काढायचं एवढं दिसणार
Dr. Patil, Transit College. Thank you all. I request all the dignitaries to occupy the chair. It gives me immense pleasure to extend a very warm welcome on behalf of Department of Commerce, Underside Mahavidyalaya, association with Planning and Development Department, certified slave leaders, jointly organizes 2 days national workshop on implementation of National Education Policy 2020 Industry Input and Training. I welcome to Honorable Chief Guest, Dr. R. S. Mali, Vice Chancellor, Law of Maharashtra University, Dr. Anjali Sajilal, NAP Coordinator at BVM Damodar College, Dr. Apurva Palkar, Vice Chancellor, Maharashtra State University of Mumbai. Principal Dr. Nitin Ghorpade and convener of this national workshop, Vice Principal Dr. Prashant Mure, Vice Principal and Dr. Shanti Fernandez, Same Via College, Dr. Rajesh Khan DP College, Dr. J.K. Pawar DP College, Professor Reshma Yadav from College, Dr. Kumar Kamkar from College, academic, all the industry, including faculty, teaching faculty, non-faculty. I welcome to all of you for a national workshop. I request to each student to present the welcome song. I did not teach my village after each class. I think we gave a work in our Indian culture. So we honor our day. I would like to request for principal Dr. Nitin to place the moment of and flower to Dr. R. S. Palkar.
मी गाव बाई
थोडं थोडं एकदा आपलं सेट झालं
सांगितलं केबल नाही देशमुख झापवली
I would like to request our principal sir to present moving and flower to Dr. Anjali Sajilal, NAP Coordinator, Goa. I would like to request Dr. Prashant Mure, sir, to present moving and flower to our principal and coordinator. Thank you, madam. Well, education is the fundamental for every full human potential, developing and equitable society. Okay, the theme of today's workshop is national education policy 2020 industry education. So today we prominent as Thank you. Our principal to enter
ह्याच्यानंतर ना
industry and salvation are mindset and we know things are our Aqua Partner right as well as I will try to welcome for the innovation of that. I am sure that the keynote speaker in this conference in the right join for
Well,
because we have a great experience. New education policy and industry linkage are very close to each other. New education policy is there to remain to the changes to the landscape of the policy being changed very including the choice of subject, quality of research, number of years in every course, professional training, and others. These changes reflect are not only educational sector, but the society. It will affect the Indian sector. New ideas and solutions will come. And it will be created new organizations for students and patients. Which will also require closer collaboration between the industry and higher education to drive innovation and research. In this field, as the demand for skill, creativity education and industry will have to go hand in hand. As education is we have to go for research and industry. Target Incubation Center, Technology Development Center, Industry Academy, and interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary research with the needs of power. We have selected the needs of ADP and either institution linkage or the national person. I welcome Ayush and Anjali Naraj, Andhra Pradesh, and Dr. Purani from DLC and tomorrow there will be Devidas Government Principal of Maratha University. He is on reading prospective plan in industry linkage under the MD. And the second session, Dr. Ghorpade and Odisha participants was there. Which guide the audience. With the organization of such workshop, the discuss on implementation of ADP in industry institute sector will happen and it will helpful for the higher education to implement the policy earlier. Industry will benefit with fulfillment of skills and trade workers and industry. I feel that the aim of organizing the workshop will be fulfilled and participants will get the opportunity to know the subject in various parts. The research will facilitate the platform to present their work. I am very sure that national workshop will be very useful for every person involved. Here, I would like to appreciate the record for the and our organizing team members for successful organization of national workshop. I again welcome again teacher and thank you.
Thank you, sir, for leading this workshop. Today, we have the honor to take with us Dr. Ghorpade, Vice Chancellor, Maharashtra State University in Mumbai. I think it is for this name to us now to introduce our guest. Good morning, everyone. If you with all the in my pleasure to introduce our figure, Dr. Ghorpade, has been appointed as the first Vice Chancellor of Maharashtra State University, Mumbai. Dr. Ghorpade the Center for Innovation, Innovation and Linkage at University. Dr. Ghorpade graduated in Business Administration from Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and also pursued PhD in Business Management. And she has been teaching and conducting research in the field of business administration for more than 2 decades. She was also active as the chair of the committee that conducted the All India examination for management science courses. Even in the education committee by the state government, Dr. Ghorpade is involved the Chief Executive Officer of Safar International Learning Center. Dr. Ghorpade it was during this time that she received the prestigious National Award has been made for the year. She has authored 5 books So we have a prominent case
शेअरला परमिशन नाही.
Now I would like to invite Dr. Babu Bhavan to act as well.
Hi, good morning. You want me to start? I'm not able to hear you so well. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Can someone help me enable my screen share so that I can do a presentation? Can you please help me the screen share so that I can share my presentation, please?
पोस्ट कर त्यांना पोस्ट कर.
Post, make post.
Make post.
Active member share.
Make a post. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, still having a equity, please.
Have you? Okay. Yes. You've allowed me the share. Entire screen.
Just a window.
Window.
PPT must be open somewhere.
Open. Yay. Share.
Check.
Can you see the screen? PPT? Can you see my PPT, please?
No.
No.
एक
Okay.
पोस्ट केलंय ना. हा पोस्ट केलंय ना. ओपन करा ते. शेअर करा. शेअर
Share anyone करा ना. Anyone काय share करा.
शेअर त्यांच्याकडे आहे. हा त्यांनी करायचंय. त्यांनी करायचं. आपलं नाही करायचं. आपण नाही करायचं. पोस्ट करून ठेवलेले त्यांना. पोस्ट करू का त्यांना डायरेक्ट? मग पोस्ट नका. पोस्ट केलेले. पोस्टच पाहिजे. पोस्टला आहे त्यांचं प्रॉब्लेम.
त्यांना आम्हाला सेंड करायचं आम्ही.
मी करतोय. ते करतात ना. नाही मी करतोय. कशाला करतो तू? नाही मी काय करतोय तू. नाही चेक करतोय तिथं काही सेटिंग नाही. त्यांचं प्रॉब्लेम. काय करतो
सर त्या सेंड करतील का आपल्याला? सर इथे
करू ना मग.
स्क्रीनशॉटचं ऑप्शन काय आहे?
सर्व एकत्र
त्याचं ऑप्शन जास्त
सर म्हणतात
नाही होते तिथला शेअरचे ऑप्शन मध्ये बघा ना. एनीवन करा ना. शेअर एनीवन.
तेच बघतोय मी तर सर म्हणले तिथे काहीच करू.
I have shared the PPT with Ghorpade sir on WhatsApp. You can also.
तुम्ही कशाला करताय इथं? तुम्ही कशाला शेअर करताय?
त्यांना ते होस्ट करूयात ना.
हो होस्ट केलेत ना.
हो केले.
तुम्ही नका काय करू इथं, त्यांना करू देत इथं. इथं पीपीटी असेल तरच आपण करू शकतो.
I have sent the PPT to you. I have sent the PPT to you. Ghorpade sir, I have sent the PPT to you. You can share it from there. Ghorpade sir, I have shared the PPT with you.
त्यांना फोन द्या त्यांचा. त्यांना फोन फोनवर बोला म्हणून. दिला तिकडे.
आहे का कुठे?
दिला ना मॅडम.
तुम्हारा PPT खोल कर.
मेलवर आली असेल ना.
इथे मी लोक माहिती ओपन नाही सरांना व्हॉट्सअपला पाठवाय सांगा, माझं व्हॉट्सअप ओपन आहे किंवा मग तुमच्या व्हॉट्सअपला घ्या.
त्यांना अडचण काय आहे शेअर करायला?
तुमच्याकडनं होत नाही सर. सर्व इथे
त्यांनी पाठवली ना.
ये कर लें क्या?
माझ्या व्हॉट्सअपला टाकलं ना.
That is the reason why
युट्यूबला केली.
हो चालू आहे.
एवढा तमाशा.
सर माझ्या व्हॉट्सअपला पाठवता येईल का? लगेच डाउनलोड करतो. YouTube लाईव्ह आहे आता. हा
शेअर करतो ना.
डाउनलोड
केलं.
करून कर आणि नंतर स्क्रीन शेअर कर.
हो.
हे कुणाचं चालू आहे? डाउनलोड केली ना.
झालं चालू झालं.
शेअर
ओपन कर आता, स्क्रीन शेअर कर.
हो.
ओपन केली का?
हो
ओपन केली. त्यांना एडिटिंग करा.
yes, it is there.
शेअर.
Share the screen, please. The PPT.
फक्त पुढच्या स्लाइड्स हे करावे.
ते कसं
Share now.
स्लाइड्स पुढच्या ह्याच्यात जावं लागेल.
Shall we start? Can you all hear me well? Can someone tell me if you can hear me?
Yes, yes. Yes, Rani.
Yeah, we can go to the first slide. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Professor Nitin Ghorpade, sir, for having invited me today for this program on new education policy. Unfortunately, I cannot see everyone so well, but I can see Dr. R.S. Mavi there. who is one of our guiding forces as far as the new education policy goes. And personally, I think he's been one of my mentors as well. Uh, 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 I understand that we have an audience here. So very keen to understand how the new education policy implementation is going to take place in times to come. There have been multiple sessions that have been conducted on this particular topic, and various points of views that people have on the new education policy. But since I represent Maharashtra State Skills University as the Vice Chancellor of this university, founder Vice Chancellor of this university, uh, this probably would be one university which would be aligned completely or 100% to the new education policy. Fortunately, because we are starting off afresh, so I'm going to be presenting some of my views on new education policies and what is our understanding and how are we taking this forward, and probably could be of some learnings and use to the audience today. Can we go to the first slide, please? Can someone move the slide, please? Yeah. So according to me, the key principles of the new education policy, as you see on the right side, are the factors that we see from the student perspective and from the perspective of the organization or the institution that we represent are on the left side. So we clearly feel that the new education policy has a complete focus on student. And from the student perspective, the new education policy speaks of how do we get our students out of the rote learning process, how do we try and identify each student as an individual, and how do we develop the thinking skills in the student, and how do we ensure that when we do so, we assess the student on an ongoing basis and on a continuous basis. And so assessment will form a very significant part of the new education policy, as opposed to the kind of assessment that we have today, which is more driven to on an end assessment or an examination assessment. As opposed to that, the new education policy is focusing more on an continuous assessment basis. On the left side of the grid, as you are seeing there are two important things which will be driving the academic institutions in future. And one of the most important factors, which will be an integral part of any academia, is how do we use the technology well? So, how are we able to transform and bring the education to the doorstep of people using the technology is going to be a very significant part of the new education policy. I also strongly feel that we will have to redefine, think on the curriculum and the way we are teaching. The pedagogies are going to undergo a lot of change. So this means that the faculty's mindset is also required to have a transitioning in the new education policy. The pillar for any academic institution is the faculty, and the second important is the student. So it may be important for the faculties to also redefine and rethink the way in which the delivery is to be made. The new education policy also is focusing on how do we make bring in parity, how do we have inclusion, how do we have equity, how do we have more number of women coming into education. Today, when we look at the statistics worldwide, we see that the population in India, 49% of the women exist in the Indian universe, and in the Indian universe, there are only 8% of the women who are engaged in the workspace. So there is a huge gap that exists as far as the gender is concerned. Similarly, there's also a part of inclusion. How do we ensure that each part of our society, from maybe the sectors that we speak of, get engaged into education, And when we have to look at an inclusive education, it may be important for us to make the education affordable to large number of people. So this is another important pillar of the new education policy. Having said this, the new education policy is also focusing on the community participation. So how do we get the whole community to participate in the academia? Uh, uh, can we go to the next slide? So what are going to be the major reforms in the university system and in the college system and the college ecosystem? I feel that we're all aware of the fact that we will have to forego the fact that a student who is studying with me will remain with me all my life. This is not what is going to happen. He may start with me and he may end with someone else. So this is the kind of the shift in the mind for all of us sitting here that we need to have and look at. And this would also mean that we need to be really prepared for the credit transfer and ABC, which is the Academic Bank of Credits. I'm sure a lot of us have already gone ahead, and most of the universities have done that, which means that a lot of students are already engaged in the ABC. Uh, uh, the new education policy on the other side is also talking of how do we have distinction. Internationally, this has been there for very many years, that research intensive organization, teaching intensive organization, and how do we convert the teaching into a research and intensive institution to an autonomous institution and to a degree imparting institution. This is going to be the transition which is known to all of us. And internationalization of education will become a very important and integral part of our ecosystem, where we will have a lot of international players likely to come in times that we are seeing ahead of us. Maybe the entry is a slight slower path today for various reasons known to all of us, where the Western has its own ecosystem of academia, and for an academician to move from the Western world to the Southeast Asian side, there is a stigma for the reasons like the research, like the publications that happen in the circuit, etc., etc. I'm sure India will become one of the key nations for the Western world to have engagements, and we should be prepared because the new education policy has opened that barrier for all of us. There will also be a lot of integration of vocational education, skill-based education, which will form a part of the mainstream education. So there won't be any barrier. So new education policy is also saying that the mainstream education and the skill-based education have to be at par with each other. They will be multidisciplinary. So the whole concept is, how do we have the subject core being given to the students? How do we speak of multidisciplinary education, which may be given to the students? How do we give skill-based courses to the students? How do we give them ability enhancement courses to the students? How do we give them an open elective? And probably the mainstream education will also have to look at all these components into the education system. And broadly, if I look at the credit system, which has been given by the new education policy, clearly we can see that about 17% of the credit is given to skill-based education and ability enhancement education of the complete gamut that we're talking of. There is also a concept of multiple entry exit, which I mentioned, that we'll have to probably move away from the existing system, where a student does his certificate year one, exits, he may or may not be in the same institution. He may decide to take some credits from some other institution. And there are rules, there would be rules and regulations in terms of parity for the institutions where the transfers could really happen. Can we go to the next slide? So when I look at the assignment of the credits and credit levels to help organizations in the ABC. Next slide, please. We have the NCRF credit levels, which are assigned to the higher education and also to the vocational education. So at an undergraduate level, we are looking at when we try to have this parity In the academic bank of credit, it is at the undergraduate level, it is 4.5, 5, 5.5, and 6. And at the postgraduate level, it is at level 6, 6.5, and 7. And PhD is 8 level. So the whole credit framework. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah. And this is where we would definitely be having a total notional learning hour per year for a student, which will be approximately 1200 hours. And precisely speaking, at a UG level, he will be required to take up 160 credits. This is the bare minimum, and 120 for the PG level. Having said this, there is also a component of on-the-job training where there is a possibility of credit transfer for the student or the candidate who goes in for an internship, apprenticeship, on-the-job training for a candidate which was not there in the earlier education system. So there are also additional subjects, projects which could be undertaken, and additional credits could be given to the students. So the holistically, the new education policy speaks just not of the credits. So there are no barriers in terms of the credits, but it is also flexibility that we get in terms of how do we bring in maybe an industry interface by way of internship, on the job training, and convert it into credit, which is a great takeaway in this new education policy, which needs to be implemented. Can we go to the next slide? So the admission pathway, next slide, please. So admission pathway as per the new education policy that we are talking of, probably we are talking of a student who is just passed his 12th standard, can come in for a UG certification, can come in for a UG diploma. He can come in for a, sorry about that, that BVOC is not the right thing. It is the bachelor's course that he can take. And at the 4th year, he can take up bachelor's honors, master's program, which he can take. So if he does a 6 months, he can go out with a certification. 1 year in the master's program, advanced diploma, and completes 2 years, he can go in for a PG degree and a PhD level. So this is how the credit framework and multiple entry exit is being planned for the new education policy. Can we go to the next slide, please? So it is the new education policy is also clearly defining the learning outcomes. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Yes. So learning outcomes have been clearly defined in the new education policy, even for a college, an institution, an autonomous institution, a university, a private university, a deemed university, or a public university. Everyone will be governed by its own institution's vision and mission. It will also be governed by the kind of the plans that are being made by the institution for improvement from the current state to the next state. And it would also clearly define how are we defining our program objectives and how are we our learning outcomes. And the learning outcomes will have two components to it, to multiple competencies that will get mapped on the learning outcomes, and there will be performance indicator that each academic institution is required to develop for their own selves. And these performance indicators in turn will define the course learning outcome. And this will again, if there are gaps in terms of what was the vision or the objective, and the learning outcomes will go back to the course design, and there will be again a shift and a change that will go into the review plan or the action plan. So this is how is the learning outcome based assessment which is expected from academic institutions or academia in times to come through the new education policy. Next slide, please. So I'm talking of the next aspect, which is the technology and the examination system. It won't be far away that our universities, our academia will have to kind of be prepared for on-demand examination. This is a concept which is being spoken of very widely at the state level. Also, where the student is not required to really wait for the semester to come to an end. He can also go in for on-demand examination, which would also mean that it would require a lot of large academic bank of credit, question bank formats for multiple questions have to be ready with the examination system, which becomes a very significant and important part. The education policy is also talking about, I mean, the whole world today is speaking of how do I bring education on my mobile phone. So this is where the examinations will also come, which we have already witnessed that during the COVID times, but this will become kind of a norm in the next academic framework that we see in next 15 to 20 years for India, where we will have on-screen evaluation system on a mobile or a laptop. And most important thing that I see in this new education policy, which is for people who may have left their education for some reason, will have the ability to come back to the mainstream education through recognition of prior learning. For example, if someone who has opted out of the education and for various reasons beyond his control and started work for about 5 to 7 years may come back with recognition of prior learning and through an assessment which will be done by some universities like Maharashtra State Skills University, which will give a certification to the student for the entry level through a bridge program into mainstream education. So these are, I think, great takeaways for the new education policy. Can we go to the next slide? I'm going to be speaking a little from the skills perspective. Next slide, please. So I see a huge convergence of skills in the new education policy, and the new education policy is trying to see how we can transform India by providing high quality education opportunities by actually effectively integrating the skills. And we're talking on one side about the demographic dividend of the country, but I think the demographic dividend will be encashed strongly if we are able to bring in high quality of education, which has a strong component of doing, which comes through the skills. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I'm trying to summarize the key priority areas of skills in new education policy. So when we look at new education policy holistically, the holistic framework is talking of recognition of prior learning. It is talking of high quality education integrating with skills training, which is also given very, very strongly with the representation of industry into the course curriculum. It is also talking of the academic credit-based skill qualification framework as per the NCRF. The model guidelines have come for assessment of everyone. It is also, on the other hand, talking of MEME, which is multiple entry exit, which I mentioned some time back. And how do we make technical and vocational education available in all languages? This is very important point which has been raised in the new education policy, that 90% of the students are not from the English medium. Yesterday, I had the fortune of meeting somebody from the Southeast Asia and from Japan, and she was quite surprised on the fact that India is a country where a lot of teaching is happening only in English language, in spite of the fact that a majority of the population cannot understand the language. So I think there is a huge opportunity of conversion of the English language content into regional language. Then this is what is one of the major focuses of new education policies. Having said that, it's also focusing on assignment, accumulation, storage, transfer of credit through ABC, and this is where will be a lot of flexibility given to people to upgrade themselves at any stage in their life, is what are the takeaways from the new education. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Yeah. Vocational courses and skills facilitation is what we're seeing in the form of major and minor, which can come in from the NSQF framework. There is also a talk and a thought of cognitive skills, which is the foundational and higher order skills. It is also talking of, so India already has created multiple sector skill councils which are there. There are multiple qualification packs which are given. There are national occupational standards which have been assigned there. It's just for the academia to pick this up and integrate it into the academic system. And what is also getting significant is how do we give the hands-on training to the student. It is very surprising that at times people have gone into a science program or an arts program, really not understanding how the reality works in terms of the workspace or the jobs. Yesterday I had the fortune of being with one of the very big business tycoon of Mumbai, Mr. Hiranandani, who is also in the spaces of building. He has hospitals, he has academic institutions, and to my surprise, there were some of the observations that he shared, which were very revealing. And these observations were kind of the fact that an engineer who has done his civil engineering has never touched a sand in his lifetime. So this is what really happens in all the spaces that we are engaged in. Science, arts, commerce, everywhere it is the same.
त्यांचं चालू असणार आहे.
Screen share.
Are you able to hear me, guys?
Yes.
Yes. So we are speaking of the blended learning in vocational education and training. So, so that there are, yes, next slide, please. So we are talking of the aspects of the theoretical classes. We are talking of soft skills and life skills. We're also talking of how do we show demonstration. Next slide, please. Practical skills and lab works, tutorials, assignments, and on-the-job training and apprenticeship. So can we have the next slide, please? So the major dimensions of the national credit framework will be the academia, it will be the experiential learning, and it is going to be the skills. So these are going to be the three important factors. And as a university, what we are really looking at, how do we look at developing all these factors into the new education policy. I think because of a lot of technical glitch, little bit what I could share with you on the new education policy, I have shared with you. I will be more than happy to sometime come in person and discuss with you in details on what are the offerings from this newly formed university and how could your institutions and colleges participate with us. Thank you so much.